Thank you to being for everything. Thank you for this healing webinar. Thank you to the divine and everyone who's present with us today and who will be present with us in the future for this particular session and recording. Thank you to all the forms of consciousness which are responsible for healing. Thank you to all the forms of consciousness which are responsible for the flow of wisdom or knowledge, the great holy tradition, the great eternal tradition of wisdom. Thank you to everyone's ancestors for also being with us and for being present as the expression of the physiology, like actually that we have bodies. Thank you to the ancestors for that. Special. Thank you all for the blessing of this session, that we may work concisely and efficiently and profoundly, and that we may go to the core of the most important work that we can possibly do in tonight's session, and to do that work in the highest and best possible way, and to support everybody's ability here and for all times to become self-sufficient and self-sustaining and to master the energy healing process. Thank you. All right. So what we're going to do is, now that we've done our prayer of gratitude, is I'm going to do a little recap of what is energy work in 1 minute, as usual, for all the new people. And then after that, we'll go into today's session. The title of today's session is Healing Ourselves and Mother Earth. And so this is an opportunity for us to do a live webinar that involves lots of healing work and lots of support for inside and outside, inside of us in the field of our own consciousness and outside in the field of our beautiful world. Okay. So what is energy healing? Thank you. Energy healing is the process of focusing attention intelligently in order to affect or produce specific results or specific byproducts in the field of the relative. So basically, energy healing is about an interface between internal reality and external reality. So what we're really doing is we're working with what we already have, which is everyone's innate ability to focus intention, and everybody's really good at that. Even little babies are good at that. And to use the ability to focus attention as the tool to create positive change, to create evolutionary change, to support better alignment of individuality with the environment, particularly the evolutionary, natural evolutionary processes that are taking place everywhere in the universe, and to support, to nourish all the aspects of both ourselves and our environment that require that, and to support the purification or the cleansing aspect of the evolutionary process. So both the inner and the outer stroke of creation, the laws of nature that break things down and the laws of nature that build things up. And then that lovely spot in the middle where both are together in balance. So that's what energy healing is about, is getting awareness positioned so concisely that every impulse of intelligence, every impulse of self has this effect of pushing the process of evolution forward, of enhancing that process for oneself as an individual, and also enhancing for everybody else and everything else at the same time. So it's like a nice big alignment. All right, that's energy healing. Now, We're focusing attention intelligently, which means focusing attention is a basic, and everybody's pretty familiar with that. The intelligently part means where to focus. So I have a little bit of a map, some guideposts, and that includes looking at the ocean of consciousness, the field where we focus our attention in terms of various axes, because we need to know how we're going to navigate that ocean in order to put our attention in intelligently. Yes? Okay. So, axes include modern science axis from very, very small to very, very big, right? Scientists, physicists look down to the quantum level and they go, oh, very small, and out into the cosmos, oh, very big. And then like that whole field is a field of inquiry for modern science. Then we can look at, that's one way of kind of like dividing up the ocean of the universe from little parts to big parts. Another way we can divide up the ocean of the universe is between dense and non-dense, such as dense like the middle of a black hole, all the way to very, very abstract. We're looking at the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. And then space is like very non-dense, and then even finer than space is consciousness. So all the way down to the field of unmanifest consciousness. That's another axis, from very dense to non-dense. And we own those two axes we have been given, like bestowed upon us by the grace of God, that as humans, we are at this, our bodies, our physical bodies are at this point of kind of like a middle point, and maybe it looks like a middle point because we are looking from the perspective of our physiologies between bigger than the biggest and smaller than the smallest. We're kind of like in the middle. At least it feels that way, right? Because we can look down to cells and atoms and subatomic particles and so forth, or we can look out into the cosmos, and in either direction, we're sort of in the middle. And as far as from dense to subtle, we have our position. We have our position based on physical body, and then the field of our consciousness, which becomes more and more subtle as we dive to deeper and deeper levels of consciousness. And that's, in that case, we haven't been given a central position as we have with our physical bodies. We've been given a range. We've been given a range. In fact, essentially, it is my experience, the human consciousness has the potential to traverse that entire range, from very dense to very subtle, to non-manifest. And that is the birthright of humans. Okay, how about the axis from destructive laws of nature to constructive laws of nature? Sometimes I talk about that as the range from chaos to order, or from dense, like heavy, like hellish, to heavenly and light. So that's another range. And with regards to that range, again, it's a situation of self-positioning at a central location, the point of balance between those constructive and destructive laws of nature, so that we are in a position to support the natural evolutionary flow of destruction and construction. We support that flow by positioning at the center and witnessing the process of the universal manifestation. From the central point, without getting gripped in either of those ranges, in either the heavenly range or the hellish range, it allows all those laws of nature to work together in a very dynamic and harmonious fashion, which they are designed to do. That's what they're designed to do, to support evolution. And within our own physiologies, that process is going on all the time. And that point of balance gets us aligned with that lovely point of pure, unmanifest, in the range that goes from dense to subtle. Getting into the balance of the range that goes from dark to light gets us balanced at that lovely point of ideal positioning to support everything that's happening. Everything. Okay, and there's another range. There's another range, which is from asleep awareness to wide awake awareness. That's another range. And that is a very interesting range, because that's the range that we have some autonomy over. And as humans, in the human condition, all of us start out somewhere in that range, or we start our lives somewhere in that range. And as life goes on, and as evolution continues, or it expands, we could say as consciousness expands, we find ourselves more awake and more awake and more awake. So we can think of that range from asleep awareness to awake awareness to no awareness to full awareness as more like a trajectory, more like a process. And this is where energy healing ties in, I would say, is that always our physiologies are very intelligent. There's a saying I've read, that we're receiving something like 2 billion bits of information a second as humans. As humans, the universe is pouring input into all of our senses of perception, into our physiologies, into the space around us, 2 billion bits of information per second. And the whole system, the whole physiology and psyche and all that is designed to filter all that information so that we're just coming up with those bits that we need in any given moment in order to be as effective as possible and in order to deal with our experience at any given moment. So being in that range from more asleep to more awake naturally puts us in a position of filtering less of that reality. That process of moving from filtering more, because that would be like full asleep, right, is filtering more, to filtering less, being full awake and full awareness of the entire expanse of the cosmos and the entire depth and breadth of what the ocean of consciousness really is. That requires give and take between the physical form, which is our vehicle, and that process of expanding consciousness. So there's a give and take right in there. And so we know, we've talked about how important it is to refine consciousness, to refine the physiology, to refine the sense of balance between dark and light. If we find ourselves gripped anywhere from hell to heaven, or anywhere from gripped by the destructive realities of nature, the constructive realities of nature, that's going to slow down that awakening process. We have to stay balanced for that, as I mentioned before. But the awake to asleep, that's really the area that we're playing with when we come, and I'm using the word playing, but it's actually sophisticated play in the field of energy healing. And the reason is that when we're receiving 2 billion bits of information per second, that means that our body knows it, that our body's receiving that. And then our body's like, oh, where should I filter? And we've got all these forms in our body that filter, like the corpus callosum filters, and the kidneys filter, and the liver filters. And even in the lungs, there's all this filtering that goes on with the air that we breathe. And even in the digestive system, there's filtering that goes on. You know, some of the food particles we keep, and some of the bits and pieces we don't keep, and so forth. So there's like a continuous, the whole body system is a great filtering system. And looking at the filtering systems. So what happens is the body's super smart, and it knows when, because it may filter out stuff so that our conscious awareness only gets part of the picture, but the body gets the whole thing. It gets all of that stuff. So the body's like really extra smart. It's able to receive 2 billion bits of information at a time and somehow process that. So that is amazing. That is amazing. The body is amazing. So what does the body do? It says, okay, the consciousness within the physiology, within the form, the soul in the form, is able to process X amount of information at a time. So I'm going to have to filter out everything else. And then after a while, the consciousness in the form becomes, the relationship between consciousness and the physiology becomes more integrated. Growth takes place, maturation takes place, and then the being says, oh, it looks like the soul within the form can handle more. So then the body also has to go through an adjustment period in order to accommodate that it can allow more information through to the awareness. So there's this continuous adjustment that's taking place between the physiology, which is getting everything and has to figure out what to filter, and the consciousness within the physiology, which has a continuing, we would say, a continuing expansion of ability to process information. So people get sick when the body is ready to give you more, and the consciousness inside the body is like, no, I'm only used to a certain amount and I don't want any more. And then the body will say, yeah, but here's an area where I want to open up and I want to give you more. And so it'll create pain in that area. And so pain will come and, sometimes like the back, the lower back, places where stuff is hidden, so the awareness then has to go there and has to unpack. One has to consciously take a choice to unpack what's going on in that area. Why is that pain there for me? And what do I need to do to support an integration so that that part of my body feels bliss, so that that part of my body starts to flow in wholeness again. So I'm looking out into the field of our healing collective. We've got a lot of people online tonight. Thank you, everyone. And one of the first things that I'm seeing as I look is the relationship between individual and collective web of life, field of creation. And that makes sense because that's where the 2 billion bits of information are coming in, is from the environment, and both inner and outer environment, and the individual self. And at this point, we're moving into a healing for this webinar. And that it's interesting that as I'm looking, as I'm feeling into our collective, many things are happening at once. One of the things that's happening is a sort of coordination is taking place within our collective. I'm seeing it happening within people's physiologies, and I'm seeing it happening within our collective as a whole. It looks like the opening of channels of internal communication. There's a lovely dynamic taking place right now too, because every day different laws of nature dominate in our universe, in the field around us. And at this time, the laws of nature dominating right now as we're doing our webinar have to do with the dynamic transformation that occurs in the gap between absolute silence and dynamic silence. That spot. And it's more lively than ever. The energy from that spot is actually, at this time, has wended its way up into the field, the web of life, and the field of creation around us, and is really like dynamically expressed in all the nodes of creation. So what that means is there's a quality right now of extreme tenderness, delicacy, sensitivity, softness in the nodes within the web of life. So the web of life, it's all through the whole universe. And in the web of life, there are all these like streams or beams of consciousness that overlap. And at each node, there's a little dynamic going on where the destructive and constructive laws of nature are kind of pushing and pulling against each other. And they're creating a vibration or a scintillation of consciousness, which provides the energy by which this world is manifest. So in those nodes where that pushing and pulling is going on, it's as if the pushing and pulling is like becoming more refined. I guess you could say that right at this time. Those nodes, all the nodes are infused with a quality of the dynamics between when I'm putting my fingers like this, I'm referring to the y-axis that goes from dense to subtle, right? And that down at the deepest end of this y-axis, there is being, unmanifest being. And being has its subdivision into absolute silence and then dynamic awakening silence. Silence resting and silence flowing, you could say. And right in that junction, right in that spot between the two, that's where the resource, which is behind all energy healing, resides there. And it's also where the purest love of Mother resides. Purest love, softest quality of being, tenderest impulse of creation is right in the movement between silence and dynamism. Right in that spot where the silence starts, the mechanics begin of self-recognition. Mechanics of self-recognition begin right there. So we could call it self-recognition. Anyway, that incredibly fine point in creation, at this time, the way the laws of nature are running, has moved up into all the nodes at the more manifest levels of creation. And that very, very fine quality of self-recognition is present in all the nodes, So you have your destructive and constructive laws of nature, and they're almost like as if fighting, right? Because they're moving in opposite directions, and there's a friction associated with that. And what's happening at those points of friction is self-recognition. Self-recognition. Oh, I'm seeing it's like mirror images. All of a sudden they realize, oh, we're bilaterally symmetrical. Like the necklace is bilaterally symmetrical. So I'm watching, I'm just looking at it. What it is the foundation of peace. It's the foundation for peace. Like anytime there are opposing factions, right? You have two countries who are disagreeing, or two groups which are disagreeing. Yeah, good. We've got someone commenting up here about congestion in the nodes. And this is coming from an energy healer. So she's seeing that energy. Yeah, it's the congestion. It looks to me almost like a habit. That the habit, the general tendency in the nodes is a real kind of like, duke it out kind of like friction, like flow. And what's happening is it's like Mother is coming. The mother of all of them is coming and just saying, now guys, you have to get along. Kind of like that. It's like that pure, loving Mother energy from that deep source of self is working into these nodes in the web of life and is saying, now guys, soften up here. You're really just dealing with yourself. That's a self-recognition element. So it's so tender and it's so delicate. I just want to take a second to like reverently honor it. So I'm just going to look at it in my silence for a minute to see how it goes. Even the words seem a little too crude at times. You know how the yin-yang symbol has a white dot in the black area and a black dot in the white area? It's like that. It's that the black isn't fully black and the white isn't fully white, but that they actually contain the seeds of each other. They're almost like the soft embrace around the seed of the other one, like that. And I'm seeing something like that in our physiologies. I'm seeing a healing for the bodies in today's webinar. And that we have, something very nice, very soft is happening right now. I love it. It's delicious. So we have these three main Mahamarmas that a lot of you have heard me talk about before. The head, which orients towards the relative, the gut, which orients towards the absolute, and the heart, which stands as a balance and a kind of a liaison or a junction between the two. And that soft self-recognition is definitely a kind of a natural byproduct of the energy in the heart. Because the heart has like a folding of self-referral energy in it, because this is where our essential truth resides in the physiology. If you put your hands over your heart and you just feel the energy that goes on in the heart, taking a minute to just feel what's going on in there. There's feeling, and it's beautiful, it's soft, it's universal. There's a universal feeling in the heart. There's an aspect of everyone's heart area, heart chakra, heart energy center, which is completely integrated with the rest of creation. Basically, it's completely integrated with that spot where that little self-recognition takes place in silence. So there's our balance point, everyone. We're just getting everyone stabilized in that balance point. The seed of the one is in the other. The seed of, oh wow, downloads coming in. The seed of the mechanics of manifestation, which are expressed in the subtler levels of this is my y-axis from dense to subtle, and it's like the first axis I started working with when I was doing energy healing, so I refer to it often. From unmanifest being, which is down at the base, and then up through the mechanics of manifestation, move up from unmanifest being up to manifest self. And so all those mechanics are part of that inner world. They're part of the field or the ocean of consciousness, which generally tends to remain outside the range of gross senses of perception. But that's where a lot of the good stuff happens. That's where energy work happens. That's the area that we exercise or leverage in order to produce really useful, concrete evolutionary effects at the surface of life. So that area is important. And the part of the body that like thinks about it, the part of the body that's designed or geared or created to deal with that is the entire gut area. They say the gut's like the second brain, right? So we've got our gut area. Well, a lot of very interesting things happen in that area, even though they're usually considered taboo in our culture, including the creation of a human body. The human body is created there. That's huge. That's magical. Even as someone who's been through that process, both of having been created and also creating, I can say that there's something incredibly magical about it. That even though I know there are people who are experts in that area that understand a lot about the physical mechanics of how that process takes place, the reality is that the spiritual mechanics or the inner mechanics of that process are so profound. They are so universal. They are so primordial and exquisite that we have yet to fully grasp what happens there. Okay, so just this morning, or was it yesterday? I think it might have been yesterday. I was doing a little bit of exploration into some of the very fine brain structures deep inside the brain. And like very fine, very small structures deep at the very deep inner part of the brain. And I was doing so because I was examining the nature of the arcuate nucleus, which is a little tiny organ that sits in the third ventricle of the brain between the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, because I was doing some work to help somebody on that account. That happens to be where appetite is regulated. And what I found was that the arcuate nucleus isn't the only little organ in there. There are others. There are others, and there are spaces. There's a whole series of little tiny structures that are really small, and they're all clustered around. This is so interesting, guys. Human bodies are just so, we're already expressions of divinity. We already are. It's just when we discover it, it's like, oh, now I see I am like totally an expression of the whole universe. It's very interesting. So right up at the top of the brain stem, there are these two areas. One is called the ventral tegmental area, and one is called the substantia nigra. And what they do is we've talked about these before and done healings for them. These are the producers of dopamine in the body. That means the producers of that neurochemical which makes you feel intensely blissful. Creates bliss. And bliss is one of the forms of it's like it interfaces with consciousness. The dopamine is produced, but we don't experience, what we experience is joy. And joy is intangible. So what's very interesting is around these two little parts, which are right up at the top of the brain stem that make the dopamine, there are all these other little parts that are regulators. And one of them is the arcuate nucleus that regulates appetite. But there's like another one that regulates sexual appetite. And there are others, and I didn't have time to go into every last one of them, but there's like a dozen of them, at least a dozen of them. Hopefully by the next webinar I will have taken a closer look and I can give you more detail on the whole thing, but it's enough to know that these forms that regulate are sitting next to the part that makes the bliss. So it's like there's a part that produces, it's the producer of the good stuff. And then there are the parts around it that decide, well, just how much of that good stuff are we going to let fly and how much are we going to constrain back? So there are aspects in this very deep, we call the third ventricle of the brain. It's like deep inside the brain. And of course, we know what hypothalamus is right in there, and pituitary, which are also regulators, right? Hypothalamus is looking at everything and deciding what's what in the body and what needs to be regulated, pushed forward, and what needs to pull back. And the pituitary regulates the entire endocrine system. So think of them as like administrators. But what they're administrating is a deep inner experience of what it is to be human. They're regulating all the forms that we create in our bodies that give expression to our own divinity. So we could think of that area, that third ventricle in the brain, as like the spot in the yin-yang symbol. That we've got this whole big, lovely brain, senses of perception head thing at the top of our bodies, which is oriented toward the relative and looking at the field of life around us and taking in information and analyzing the information like that. But then there's this part, there's this one little bit in the third ventricle way inside the brain, which is more about understanding the inner reality, the reality of consciousness. What I'm seeing happening in our group, in our beautiful, holy group, is I'm seeing some awakening of self-definition. The regulators, the administrators. This is where we control what we experience. This is where we control our self-positioning in order to make maximum use and gain maximum evolutionary value from each life experience. It's very powerful. It's very powerful. So what I'm feeling is a lot of energy is rolling around in there inside that third ventricle right now. And I'm feeling those are nodes, right? Each of those little organs are like little nodes in the field of consciousness, only manifest nodes. And that energy from the source of creation, from the mother of the universe, is sitting up there in the third ventricle. And it's like lovingly embracing each of those little organs. It's lovingly holding, balancing, nourishing, supporting, revitalizing, particularly for people who have concerns in that area. We know Parkinson's disease, for example, is a byproduct of an imbalance in the substantia nigra area of the brain. There's no nigra. When people have PD, they lose the nigra part of the substantia nigra. Nigra refers to the color. It's like a dark color, like you know, the word negra being like the color black in some Latin language. The color lets the physiology produce a kind of a richness of quality of neurochemical that nourishes the physiology. So that's actually a healing. It's going out to everyone to activate and enliven, support the nigra, part of the substantia nigra, to revitalize, to check. We're checking in everybody's third ventricle and everybody's substantia nigra area that it's full. There's that fullness of that quality, which by its nature, because we think of the dark color as kind of like dark, right? We think of it as like associated maybe not with bliss, but maybe with the opposite of that, with darker feelings or something. No. Right there, it's such a perfect balance of the destructive and constructive laws of nature that it's able to put together that which is both not comfortable and that which is comfortable together in such a way that it creates a very, very potent energy medicine. It creates a very potent product, which is the dopamine, which is essential for the feelings that we associate with intense happiness. This is also for people who have, who are dealing with emotional discord, like depression. To support the ability to maintain that lightness and openness to experience, no matter what happens in the relative. Whatever happens in the relative is somewhere along that x-axis between horrible and wonderful, right? So no matter what happens, we maintain that balance. And that substantia nigra is like smack in the middle of the head. It's like that's the balance spot. Oh, we're healing that. This, how lovely. Who would have known? No, bless you all for being here and for guiding this meditation. You guide. I'm the mouth. I'm the speaker, but you're really, or the consciousness of our group is doing it. And what I'm seeing is, because the nature of this particular webinar was to support our healing and also the healing from Mother Earth, one of the things that's caused imbalances in our ecosystem and on our Earth is that over the long course of time, there's been a kind of a buildup of events which, by their nature, had a destructive effect. I'm actually right now flashing on a particular lake in Russia about, I don't know, 3 years ago or 4. You know, I'm constantly researching online all sorts of things that have to do with energy healing. So turns out there's this lake that after World War II, because Russia was engaged in the arms race along with the US, there was like a lot of uranium mining around this lake. And I remember going online and seeing, I can't remember the name of the lake, unfortunately, but I remember it. Not so different. The original picture of the lake is not so different from this beautiful lake that's behind me in this picture. It was a beautiful lake, and it had a mountain. It had some mountains around it like that, and some evergreen trees. It was so beautiful. It was like a holy place. It was one of Earth's nodes. It was one of those spaces where Earth's intelligence was very lively. It had made all these uranium deposits or something. Anyway, what happened was it became a dumping ground for radioactive material. And so the byproduct of that was that the lake got dirtier and dirtier and dirtier with radioactive material. And at this time, they showed like a picture of what the lake looks like now. At this time, the lake is so dirty that it's actually deadly for any human to be even near the lake for more than an hour. If you go in the vicinity of the lake for more than an hour, you die. It was like this. It was beautiful. It was a holy place. There were devas that lived there. And now it's this like horrible, dead place that kills anything that comes close to it. So there's spots like that on our earth. I know it's hard to even think about. When I saw the pictures, it was hard for my heart to look at those pictures, particularly the before and after, because it was so beautiful before and it was so scary afterwards. But what happened was, it lost the bliss. I'm just checking in with Earth's laws of nature in that area and any other little areas that are hurting. And what I'm seeing is that there are intelligences deep within the earth which are like the custodians of Earth's bliss. And there are in our bodies too. Obviously, the substantia nigra area is one of those places. It's an area responsible for bliss, for holding it. It's very deep, so it's deep inside the skull, so it's like really safe. You can't get, if you bump your head, it probably won't hurt that part deep inside. If you get an owie on your finger, it won't hurt that part deep inside. So those structures of Earth that are responsible for being the custodians of the bliss, they're still there. They're still there. And as we're doing the healings for our own physiologies and for the physiologies of people that we love, we have about 100 people on this webinar, but I have a list, I have my own list of people that I'm constantly aware of who have the need for this healing. So they're also included in this healing. That's a spot of bliss in the middle of the head. This is another spot of bliss, right? We put our little hands here and we feel what actually goes on in the heart. If you feel it, it's bliss. Love is blissful, sweet. That part of the earth felt really betrayed, that lake in Russia. I'll see if I can find its name. Maybe my team can make a note that I should do a little search for the name of that lake. Then at least we'll all know where it is. We can look at it on Google Maps or something. We establish the bliss. There's a bliss that comes with the creation of human life, right? Right? With reproduction, there's a bliss. So these three main spots in the physiology have their own kind of like deeply embedded locations where bliss or sweetness of being is preserved. Oh, thank you. Thank you, darling. We've got people doing the research right now. Woohoo! So Lake Karachay. That sounds right to me. I think that sounds like that's what I remember it. Thank you so much, darling, for doing that, for looking that up. Lake Karachay, Karachay. So the earth has little spots all over it where there's been like over the long course of time, or because of particular incidents, there's been like a buildup of stress in those areas. And what happens is over the course of time, those areas, unless we are very proactive as a race to get rid of the stress in those areas, and that doesn't just mean going in and physically cleaning them up. That means going in and energetically cleaning them up. That means removing the hatred, removing the lack of consideration. When, not saying that there's anything, I have no complaints against the Russians. I consider us all part of the same family of humanity. But at the time the decision was made, oh yeah, let's go ahead and dump all this radioactive material in this lake. At the time that decision was made, that decision didn't take into consideration the beauty and the sweetness and the Davic intelligence and the intelligence in the rocks and the intelligence of all the plants that were living around the lake. It wasn't animals. It wasn't taking any of that into consideration. It was like on a very kind of gross level, right? So on the gross level, we can go in and clean up, but that doesn't eliminate the imbalance unless we go in energetically and clean up. So that's what our group is doing. That's why we had at the beginning of this healing session an expansion and a clarification of inner communication. In our circle, in our healing circle, there's like we could say the web of life that holds all of us together. That web of life goes into a mode of sort of original purity. It supports each of us aligning. And that's what I'm doing when I'm talking about the different axes, right? Is I'm talking about them, but at the same time, alignment is taking place. So everybody gets self-positioned in that spot where the capability of energy healing is of maximum capacity. And it's good while we're together, while we're doing this work, remember that feeling. Think about it. Because this is where you are when you are in your fullest capability of energy healing. And we're all like supporting each other to stay in that space so that we can do this work in the most effective manner. So it's like a class, like a lesson. And what we do when we're learning something is we do it with the group, and the group helps support. Like say in band, in high school, we all have our music and we're all playing our instruments. And if I miss a note, it's okay because there's like 150 people in the band. So if I miss a note, somebody else will pick up that note. So I still get the sense of what the whole piece of music is like. And that's what we're doing in this group, is that we're each positioned to the best of our ability in a way which supports our own healing capabilities. But if there's something a little off or you miss a little spot, it doesn't matter because the group is picking it up as a whole. And so then we start to remember when you're in band, then you go home and you're humming the song that you played in band. Can you tell I was a band geek? Love band. And the next time we go back with the instrument, we remember the whole song. We even remember the note that we missed last time. And then you take the music home and you play it. And it's like, oh yeah, that's that note. I need to practice that one note a little bit more so I don't miss it next time. Like that. Good questions coming in, completely awesome. Anyway, so we started with a clarification in our group as a whole, and then we moved from that into an alignment with the collective, with the web of life. And in the web of life, there are certain nodes, which I referred to earlier, where this energy of the mother of the universe is sitting in a very lively fashion, where it's like softening the interaction. It's refining the interaction between the dark and the light forces, not in a way that lessens or depletes the power produced by that interaction, but in a way which actually refines and enhances it. It's like there's a force of nature there. It's like there's an expansion of totality in those particular nodes. So So in those nodes, instead of it being like, well, I'm on the good side and I'm on the bad side. No, I'm on the good, I'm on the bad. It's like the two sides come together and they're like, we're working as a team. And as a team, we are producing something which is vital and essential for the whole universe. And we see ourselves in the context of the entire rest of the web of creation. And all of a sudden, it's like something opens up in those nodes that they start functioning at like super capability. I'm looking at it. And as a group, we're looking out, because what I'm seeing is in the web of life, some of the nodes are working at super capability and some of them aren't. And one of the things that we're dealing with as a healing circle, and here we get into some very interesting kind of fine dynamics of what it means to be in a healing circle of this size and caliber and capability. And you know, part of our exploration here at the forefront of what energy healing is, which means getting together as a great big group and doing energy healing, like what are the implications of that? Okay, so here we are, our group, and we're coherent inside and we're coherent outside. We're connected up with those aspects of the web of life that are really at their kind of like top potential of functioning. But in the field of humanity, there are people who are not aligned with their own evolutionary trajectory. There are people who are not even thinking that there's a value in becoming more internally awake. There are people who would prefer to run away from whatever is happening, to escape what is happening, rather than to engage with what is happening. And those are their habits. People have habits. And because of that, there are also nodes, like their households. And there are places like Lake Karachay, which are just so damaged that there's not a lot that can be done about them, at least with the level of technology that we have today. So here we are in our healing circle, and we're coherent, and we're focused, and we're interfacing with the web of life, and within the web of life, some of our connections are good connections, are good, strong, clear connections. So we're kind of extending the range of our capability as energy healers through the web of life and through those channels or threads of consciousness which connect us to those coherent nodes. And then they're like the in-between areas, which are not coherent. So I'm kind of like looking out and seeing the whole thing. And I'm seeing it, you know, there's like a continuum between nodes that are really incoherent to nodes that are very coherent, and then like all the little bits and pieces in between. And this is where I see a move on the part of Mother Nature. This is where I see a move on the part of the Mother of Creation. Through our circle, through like, there's like a kind of sacred center. And I call it a healing circle, even though physically we're probably not making an exact circle, you know, like you are there and I am here, but it's not an exact circle. But our consciousness naturally forms into a coherent pattern so that each of our consciousness is close and lined up with the other consciousnesses in the circle, which are most supportive of our best work. Mother Creation is like taking a point in the center and is activating a form of light which is comprised specifically of that very, very fine, very tender impulse of self-awakening, self-awareness. And it's like using our group, our collective, as a vessel for that light. So this is coming in, and I'm seeing it coming from both directions. I see it coming in through the upper regions of creation, from the sky, from the cosmos, from the center sun. And I see it also, the field of pure being, pure and manifest being, and I'm seeing it also coming up through the earth, through Mother Earth, and through the heart of Mother Earth. And because our energy healing circle exists, and because we have consciously dedicated ourselves to this particular task in which we are engaged, It's allowing that light, which is using our circle as a vessel, also to use the core of Mother Earth as a vessel. So I'm seeing that light coming through the core of Mother Earth, like radiating from the core of Mother Earth. Because we have a point on the surface of the Earth, and that lets us have also a point in the middle of the Earth. And we need both points in order to create a balance, to allow that energy or that light of being to establish. I'm feeling a tenderness. I'm feeling quality of softness of heart. It's love. Wow. Okay, I wasn't expecting that necessarily, but I'm not surprised that this tender love is the stream or the river. It's creating like a stream or a river. It's connecting the center of Mother Earth to our healing circle and is responsible for the perpetuation. It becomes like the channel upon which the perpetuation of that self-awareness propagates. It's coming in like a download for everyone in the circle. This is interesting. It is, I'm feeling a flow of the propagation of the experience of self-awareness occurring within the whole physiology. And I'm just reading it right now. It's occurring both at the denser levels of the physiology and subtler. It's occurring at the larger areas of the physiology, like specific parts of the brain and specific organs of the body. But it's also going down and it's occurring at a cellular level as well. Is it occurring finer than that? It's occurring at the molecular level as well. So from like organs and organ systems down to cells and subcellular structures down to molecular structure. Is it going deeper than that? Yes, it's going down to atomic structure. It's going down to atomic one. It looks like it's going down to atomic one. That's interesting. So this is happening in our bodies physically. Physically, there's an awakening of self-awareness. It's being processed by the physiology. I guess part of those 2 billion bits of information, right, that the body's processing. But usually, as I mentioned before, the body's nature is to filter all that stuff. And the reason, one of the ways that we filter it is by not having a means to verbally describe it. We have experiences all the time, amazing experiences, like very cosmic experiences. But if we can't describe our experience, we tend to write it off. So the fact that we're able to describe allows the physiology to integrate the experience. I feel as if this particular healing that's happening right now is essential for the support. No. For the support of the spiritual evolution of everyone in the group. And one of our ladies here is saying, Sat Chit Ananda, brilliant bursting light. Yeah, it's super yummy. And getting all that inner brain area going. Okay. Oh, and I'm now opening, my dears, I have 2 different areas where I read your comments and questions. One is in the chat, and one is in the question and answer box. And so I'm kind of going back and forth between them. And I hadn't opened the question and answer box for a little while. So one of the questions that comes up is from my darling husband saying, are we going to squeeze Mother Earth into the healing somehow? Of course. So just looking back at, because we have this sort of, we have a kind of a flow of blessing, we could say, from the Mother of Creation that's moving through the core of Mother Earth, and it's moving up through the core of our healing circle, and it's radiating into our bodies at this point, and it's going out to all of our ancestors, because that's the molecular level of the physiology. So this is beautiful and good, and of course through us, because we're connected into the web of life, it's also going out at least into those areas of our environment where we have individuals who are awake enough and aligned enough with their own evolution and cosmic evolution that they're also picking up on this work. But in order to honor Mother Earth, I'm going back to see how she's handling the light, just how she's dealing with it. And what I'm seeing is the light is expanding in a more systemic way around Earth's core. So what that tells me is that all the values of intelligence in the Earth that are at the core of Mother Earth are quite awake. I infer from what I'm seeing that that's where there's a lot of wakeful awareness. That's where there's a lot of presence of being. And so all that area is able to receive that shining quality of being, that shining light from the heart of the mother of creation, basically, and integrate and utilize and apply directly to what's going on. And then as the light kind of radiates up to more and more the surface of the earth, it tends to, like, it looks a little bit like it breaks apart, sort of, and it starts to rise up in channels, not just like radiating out in every direction like a light, but more like coming up in streams that are coming up to the surface. I'm seeing other collectives. There are collectives of Earth's intelligence, right? There are areas like, we can think of beautiful places on Earth where there's like a lot of Earth intelligence lively collected there, which are able to function a lot like our healing circle and become the vessel for that light. Become the vessel. There's a silent communication occurring between the awakened center of our healing circle and these nodes on the surface of the earth. Oh, they're those lively nodes where the ley lines, they're places where the ley lines cross, right? Those are like energy nodes or energy centers, which are able to harness up and become the vessels for this, the perpetuation of this light, propagation of the light. There's actually a ley line that runs pretty close to it. Looks like it runs pretty much through Fairfield. It's a little hard to tell because different maps are different. They're not so specific, but it looks like it, because there's one off the coast of Florida, and then there's another one up like just off the southwest corner of Canada. And the line goes right straight through US. I'm seeing, or I'm experiencing, what feels like a deep silence penetrating through the nodes, through our healing circle, through the points on Mother Earth that are propagating this light. It's like a deep, deep, thick, beautiful, inebriating silence. I would probably associate it with Nirguna Brahm, that sort of just deep silence before the self-awareness comes in, the deep silence. So it's like there was this flow of awakening awareness, and now it's like it's folded back on itself, and it's just into this deep, deep, holy, sacred silence. And that is tying into another question here, having to do with ability to heal the little spots on the earth that are really in pain. One of our ladies asked, can Lord Shiva swallow the poison? And I believe she's referring to the poison that's in the lake, into Lake Karache. And Lord Shiva is that, represents that incredible, profound, like inescapable silence. So that silence is being offered to Lake Karache. And I'm asking, oh, this is so interesting. Okay, so remember how we were saying that this light of self-awareness is coming up through the earth, it's coming up through our group, it's going into the web of life, it's going into all the nodes where there's already some alignment with natural law and some, connection with cosmic evolution, etc. But then there are the in-between areas where the darkness is, right? They're the in-between areas where people aren't dedicated to their evolution, they're just running away, they're avoiding. They're in avoidance mode. So in those spots, this is where the silence is sitting. So we've kind of got a structure filling up. We could say the whole field is filling up with the light of our consciousness now, which is much more awake than it was even at the beginning of the session. And what it's doing is it's bringing this holy, sacred silence into those spots where there's running away, into the lake, into the spots on earth that are like really heavily damaged, into the, I'm seeing lots of spots on earth that were heavily damaged, that are getting filled up with this silence, and into the spots within the human collective, within the field of human consciousness, which are also damaged. Dysfunctional households, or dysfunctional individuals, or places like prisons, hospitals, places where there's a lot of stress, where people are suffering, places where they're suffering, spots where events have occurred that were overwhelming and people can't deal with them. Think of the little children trying to go back to school, in a school where they saw their friends shot and killed, and then they have to keep going back to school there. Like every day they have to walk in those halls where they saw people falling down, and it's like there's a part of them that does it because they have to do it, but there's another part of them that just like can't deal with it. It's overwhelming. So then there's a part that just turns it off, just shuts it off, it runs away. Those spots are receiving the balm of absolute silence. Soothing, soothes. It's so sweet. It's so sweet, that silence. And I feel as if that silence is part of the healing for the substantia nigra and ventral tegmental area of the physiology as well. And all the little organs around there, those are the dopamine producing organs, right? And then all the organs around the dopamine producing organs that regulate, because when they regulate, they have to turn on and turn off the flow. They have to do both. So they're like little switching devices. You could think of them like that. And that switching is between the awareness, the awakening of the awareness of self, and that deep, luscious, soothing silence of being in its primordial state. And both are there, both are necessary. I'm feeling as if there's a little bit of an activation for everyone in our group of a kind of an energy of balance that's sitting, this fine little spot that I keep referring to where all the resources of energy healing emerge between Nirguna Brahm and Saguna Brahm, right in there. I feel as if there's some element right in there of like a deep, deeper than ever before undersea dive, if you will, of us as a collective, as our group, diving deep into that spot, like ever finer levels of that spot to find a level of balance between the inebriating silence of Shiva, the inebriating, deep, satisfying, holy, sacred silence of the Nirguna Brahm expression of being, and the just becoming awake to its own nature. Right between them, it's like deeper than we've ever gone before. And you know, it's interesting, you guys, it takes a team. I don't know if you've ever seen deep sea divers. Well, I personally haven't, just to be perfectly honest with everybody. But I've seen videos, and what I've noticed is that when a person goes really deep sea diving, like really deep sea diving, they don't go out there all by themselves on a little raft. They go out on a big boat, and they've got a team, and they've got the equipment, and they've got all the resources with them, so that if they go really, really deep, whatever happens down at the depths of the ocean, they are covered, and they are protected, and they've got their team watching out for them, and they're communicating back and forth. And so that's like what we're doing. Like, we have this group. Every single time we have a webinar, there are more people than the time before. So our group is growing. And what's growing as we physically numbers, as we grow into this group, is the range of what we can accomplish grows. It's very exciting. We're able, because of our group and because of the focus, to dive deeper than we've ever dived before into that gap between the silence and it's into the moment where it's both absolutely silent and absolutely awake within itself, and it's both. There's like a spot where it's like full connection or full integration, totality, unity. That's unity consciousness right there. You're doing it. I've never looked at anything quite this deep before. I think it's amazing. It's beautiful. Here's another comment. This is a quote by Maharishi. Love is the finest form of gravity. Love is the essential building block of the universe. Love binds the boundless. Aha! Aha! That makes sense, doesn't it? Thank you for that quote, by the way, and thank you to Maharishi in his position as the custodian of knowledge and wisdom, both for our earth and connection to the great tradition of wisdom. Love, at that spot, that's what's going on. At that deep, 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 tender place where the yumminess or the lusciousness of the energy of absolute silence meets the moment of its own awakening. It's interesting that the silence itself is so amazingly rejuvenating to the being, to the physiology, and to the self, to the field of consciousness. And when it awakens to its own nature, that's where we start to flow on that axis between asleep and awake. That's when something starts to open and we start to move with it. But before that happens, that deep silence is the real resource for all healing. It is a condition or a place of, we could say, a placement of awareness, when awareness is placed there, where it's all satisfying, it's all soothing, it's all healing, it's all protecting, it's all comfort. Well, we've been climbing a mountain in today's healing session. Got the big mountains back there. We've been climbing the mountain, and there's another one. And we've come up to this like pinnacle, kind of a pinnacle where we've uncovered or revealed an aspect of consciousness which is has always been present and is present at every point in creation. However, it's not integrated until we directly experience it. And as a group, we're able to pool together our resources, like in the band. You know, if you go to the band concert, we go to band concerts at the high school. It's lots of fun. Anyway, in the band concert, even at the concert, when everybody's practiced a lot, there's always one or two people, or maybe several people, who miss a note here or there. But at the concert, nobody actually misses any notes. The audience doesn't experience any notes were missed, because always somebody is playing on every single note. Even if the third kid in the line misses one note, the second kid in the line picks that note up. And so, as a collective, this is, yeah, beautiful. Joe is saying, from the highest to the lowest, from the spirit into our world, integrating. Yeah, that, you know, we're, as a collective, we're able to like pull together, like knit together, the ability for each of us to have the full experience of the song, the full experience of this level of nature's functioning, which is fundamental to everything, is basic to all of our evolution, is basic for all of our healing, is basic for the healing of the earth and the people of the earth, but has been like a little bit too far away to fully access. And as a collective, we've accessed it. Now we remember what we experienced and take it home. Everybody's homework tonight is to go back. Oh, you didn't know there'd be homework. Yeah, it's going to be a test too. No, I'm sorry. Just kidding. No. So the homework is, remember what that spot feels like and revisit it. Reacquaint yourself with that spot, because that is important. It is the most fundamental, it's the most fundamental expression of each person's consciousness regarding, or necessary, I would say fundamentally necessary, for promoting our own best energy healing. Your best energy healing originates from that spot. So remember what it feels like. We did it together. Everyone will get the recording, so you can go back and visit it again with the group. And may it serve you. May it always, always serve you. May it serve the earth. May it serve all of humanity. And may we visit here again many, many times. And may we learn more and more about the best and most graceful and best aligned ways, the ways to work with this new experience and new understanding to serve all of creation in the highest and best possible way. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Thank you for being patient. We went a few minutes over, but it was really fun, and I'm really grateful that we had this time. And I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of you tomorrow as well, and all the Europeans. All right, so have a beautiful evening, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.